Welcome to The Arthropologist. I have been an illustrator for probably 36 years, or an artist for 36 years. I've been an illustrator for most of that, and I've done a lot of different things. And I get calls many times every year, people asking me to illustrate their book or just some advice about working with illustrators for their books. I also get young people who want to be illustrators and they don't know how to do the nuts and bolts. You know, they know how to do maybe the drawings and the paintings, but they don't know how to work with a potential author. And so rather than spend, hours on the phone over and over again answering many of the same questions, I put together a PDF that I now send out to anyone who contacts me about the illustration process. I send this out to them. That way they can go through it, and if they're still serious and want to talk, then we can. But this answers lots of questions that people have, and I'm just going to go through and expound on it. I do want to let you know up front that this is not just my way of working. I've got friends who have been illustrators for longer than I have. And when I first started, I had to do the same thing. I had to ask them, well, how do you do it? How do you charge? How do you work with authors? What do you tell them when they have specific questions? And they gave me guidelines. And those guidelines are what I've put together and I'm now sharing with you. And what I'm going to do is just go through, and whether you're a potential illustrator, you want to get into the business, or you're an author and you really don't know how to work with an illustrator, hopefully this will give you some idea. Now, of course, everyone's different. There may be some variations, but this is something that both I and a number of my illustrator buddies that have done this for a very long time, this is the tried and true method. And so we'll just go on and leap in and get started. When I do send this out, and forgive me, I've got it in front of me, I don't have it memorized, and so I'll read some of it and then we'll talk about it. So what I've got here is storybook, illustration process, and pricing guide. Thank you for your interest in having your book illustrated. Writing a storybook and bringing it to life is an exciting endeavor, and it is. I've done it and I love it, and it's just fun, fun, fun. Congratulations on your journey. That being said, there are a lot of steps involved in the process of making a book, some of them technical, some of them legal, that have to be adhered to make the process smooth, enjoyable, and legal. Below is a brief description of the process of working with an illustrator and the cost associated with it. I know a lot of this will seem dry and boring at best and overwhelming at worst, but if you've decided to publish your own book, you've become a publisher, and you must deal with the responsibilities a publisher incurs. So buckle up, it's about to get interesting. And let me just say right off the bat, in case you didn't catch that, if you're an author and you write your book and then you decide you want to self-publish, well, you've become a publisher. And there are a lot of things that you don't necessarily know, or you almost certainly won't know. And so hopefully this will start getting you through the process and get your mind to thinking about things. Because when I first started, I'm like everyone else. I made a lot of mistakes. Everyone does. And other people helped me along the road, and I hope I can help you. First thing to keep in mind, an illustrator is not a book designer. They are two different disciplines. Publishing companies break this into two different departments. If you are privately hiring an illustrator, are you going to design the book yourself, or are you expecting the illustrator to be the designer as well? This will affect the cost, and possibly dramatically. The illustrator creates the individual drawings and paintings. The designer actually designs the book. They choose the fonts for the book, design the cover, the dedication page, the copyright page, determine pagination, layout, bookends, etc., etc. Normally what happens if you're working through an illustration house, a publisher, they will have a designer who will sit down and design the book, and then they let the illustrator know what room they have left to even do the illustrations. I'm going to give you a perfect example. Let me make sure my little transmitter's good. This is a book I did with the University Press of Mississippi. It's a beautiful book. I did a coffee table book with Governor Phil Bryant of Mississippi a few years back. He wrote all of the text for it, and then I did the illustrations. And I won't go into it. I'll maybe do another video about this book. But the University Press designed the book and used my illustrations. But now what would happen, I didn't design this cover. The designer did. So he's the one who sat down and decided, I'm going to use embossed gold leaf. And I cannot tell you how beautiful this book is in person, and put your fingers on and feel the raised edges of the letters, and he did it as well on the spine, and it's just beautiful. Are you going to think about that, or are you going to have the artist do that? You know, the way the title went, and then pagination. You may not know what pagination is. It's real simple. It's page numbers. Where are you going to put the page numbers? This was very clever. The designer put it right here in front of the title of the illustration. Here's the text over here, and what would be called a spot illustration in the upper, is that the upper right-hand corner? Yeah. Oh, and look how he did the title of the chapter. That's just very clever, and it's very interesting. The color combinations, again, someone's got to figure all this out. And what is going to happen, I don't know if I said this earlier, the book designer does all of this first. The book designer decides where the page numbers are going to go, if they're going to be page numbers, where the text is going to go. Is it going to be in a block? Is it going to be with borders? Where is it going to go on the page? And what font is going to be used? Well, once all of that's done, then the designer hands that off to the illustrator and says, okay, this is the room you have to do what you want to do. And so there you go. And we'll just keep rolling with this. Another thing to keep in mind is that we'll cover this a little bit later, but once you hand an illustrator your manuscript, that's set in stone. You don't have the option of saying, oh, wow, you know what, I want to change this. I mean, you may have a few words you want to flip or, correct the spelling or something, but you can't go in and have, let's see, this is a book I actually did. Okay, right here. All right, you can't take all of the text that's down here and then put it up in the upper right-hand corner. And you can't take the text from the upper right-hand corner and put it down here. You can't move all this stuff around. It's working within the illustration. So the designer has to figure out, well, this is where all this stuff goes. And is it going to be a full, are you going to have any double page spreads? Is this going to be a full page bleed? Is it going to have borders like this one? There's a lot involved. And there's a lot to think about. Like, when I did this book, our publishing company printed this book. We sent it to South Korea. Well, what was really nice, we were working with an agent out of New Orleans. And I sent her the files that she would then upload. She was the one checking to make sure that everything was right, which was very, very nice, because this is expensive. If you get hardbound, even from China or South Korea, it's going to be expensive. Well, she asked me, you don't have end papers. I said, what do you mean? And the term didn't register. And she said, well, the paper that joins the cover to the pages, I mean, of course they're there, but they're just white, and you really ought to do something. And I thought, oh, okay, yeah, that's cool. So I went and I checked out a lot of our children's books that we have in our house, and I saw a lot of Dr. Seuss's books and some other books that had just characters from the stories done as spot illustrations. And so I designed this, had it printed in blue. Oh my goodness, what a difference it made. It just looks so much more professional, so much nicer. Well, there again, that's not the illustrator's job. That is the book designer's job. And I was acting as the book designer along with my son. So, who is a true designer. This was the beginning of his career, but he's actually a magazine layout designer, and he's just really, really good at it. So this was one of our first attempts, and I think we did a real good job, but it was a learning process. So again, this is something else you need to think about. Is it going to be hardbound or softbound? If it's hardbound, they're going to be bigger. Even if you, I don't know, I don't remember for whatever reason, but hardbound books are going to be a little bit bigger than softbound books. And if they are, then you got to make sure that your illustration will fall in with everything and not get cropped or not have some odd hard edges or something. So is it a wraparound cover like this? And where's that UPC? I think that's what's called UPC code. That, talk about legal. You legally have to have one of these. You can't just do a book. You got to legally have, you got to buy these. And we bought them in bulk, like 10. And that's got to be placed on the book. Another thing to think about is if you get a hardbound book from overseas. I don't know about here in the U.S. It probably isn't an issue. But if you get it done from overseas, there's an extra cost involved. And that is, it's got to go to a chemistry lab, and several books are culled at random and thrown into some sort of chemical vats. And those vats break them down, and then they do chemical analysis to make sure that the inks don't have arsenic or lead or anything like that in them. Because another name for, another term for children's books is chew toys. And I know because I've got a 39-year-old son, and I've got a 3-year-old and a 10-month-old granddaughters. And try as hard as you can, at times they go into their mouths and they get chewed on. And the government wants to be sure that they don't have any poisons or anything in it, heavy metals. So those have to be done. Well, that's an extra expense I didn't know about. And so again, this is the whole publishing process. If you're going to get involved in this, then this is some of the stuff you run into. Another quick story. Welcome to the world of publishing. I didn't have to deal with it other than just the nail biting angst and fear that we had. Have you ever thought that pirates would affect your work? I mean, actual show enough to goodness pirates. Well, they can, especially in today's world. This book was coming out of, I don't remember, it was either China or South Korea. And that's where almost all hardbound books are published. If you do the softbound and stuff through Amazon, then that's cool. And I've got a few I'll show you. But if you do hardbound books, almost all of them come out of South Korea or China. Well, they got to go around the Cape of Africa, which means they go by Somalia. And this book, the publishers, this was supposed to be ready for Christmas. And the publishers got a call from the agents dealing with the printers who said, all the shipping's been shut down. The Somali pirates are so bad that no ships are sailing right now for fear of being robbed. And so this book was delayed for a few weeks. Thank the good Lord. We did get it in time, just in time for COVID. So yeehaw. But we did get the book for Christmas. But that was something that the publishers had to deal with. And so you as the author, again, once you stop the writing process, you take off that hat and put on your publisher's hat. And these are a lot of the things you got to deal with. So that's just a whole lot that you've been bombarded with of things that if you're self-publishing that you got to learn about. And if you are employing an illustrator, how much of that are you expecting them to know? I do know sometimes people want to go to high school or college students, and that's fine. Many of them are very talented. It's just, do they have the knowledge to actually put this together for you? If you just want some spot illustrations, that's fine if you like their work. But, strictly speaking, if you're getting into this pretty heavy and you want something like a children's book that's very picture oriented, then you might want to have somebody on board that really knows their stuff. Before I move on, then another thing to keep in mind, you as a self-publisher, you're hiring the illustrator yourself. And so you get to choose the look of your book. If you give your manuscript to a publisher, you don't have say in anything. I mean, nothing. You don't choose the illustrations. You don't choose the illustrator. You don't choose the layout. You don't choose anything. They don't ask your opinion. They're not interested. And it's not that they're being ugly. It's just that you don't know anything. This is their job. Your job is to write a great book. And if it's been picked up by a publisher, then obviously you've done a pretty good job. That's where they take the baton and they say, thank you very much. We will let you know what this looks like down the road. And so this is something a lot of authors don't realize. They think that they're going to have some determination in the look and the illustration. No. Even people like J.K. Rowling, and maybe sometimes, but generally they don't ask her. It's like, it's in our hands. We're the experts. You hired us. So there you go. Now, the cost of the illustrations themselves depend on what the client wants. If you've got illustrations that are very cartoony and vignetted, then that's obviously going to cost less than something that's highly detailed with lots going on. A couple of artists you could look at would be Dr. Seuss. Although I'm not denigrating, don't think that just because it's cartoony, it's not very complex and has a lot going on. It can and does. But look at Dr. Seuss's Cat in the Hat. And then look at Graham Bass's, Graham, Graeme, Graham Bass, Animalia. Graham Bass's Animalia. That is a very, very detailed, complex illustration book on every page. Beautifully done, fun books. An illustrator, that's going to take him or her, I'm going to say him because I'm a him, it's going to take him a lot longer to do that than it is cat and hat illustrations. So just be prepared that that's a part of it. Even the smallest, simplest illustration can very often take half a day just to do that illustration. So, you think about, if you come in and say, well, I need 30 illustrations, and even if it's, just a day a piece to do everything, that's still 30 days. That's a month of someone's life you got to pay for. So sometimes sticker shock hits the beginning author, and they don't realize, ooh, this costs more than I thought. And then on the other side, for those of you who are planning to get into the world of illustration, that's something that very often you're not planning on. You sit down and say, okay, I'll do this whole book for $500. And then before you know it, you've sunk a month, 2 months of 10-hour days into this book. And you do the math, working for a month or 2 months, 10 hours a day, for for $500, you're not anywhere close to making minimum wage. So, I mean, nothing. So that keeps you in mind. My experience and the experience of a lot of my friends, the average children book will take a minimum of a month to do. That's just for the illustrator. So be prepared that a month's salary has got to go into this. And then, of course, looping back, the illustrator is not a publisher. So while he or she can give advice from past experience, they're not responsible for or claiming to be an expert in publishing. I'm not claiming to be an expert in publishing. I've done it. I've published magazines and books, and I've worked with nationally published magazines and illustration houses, but that certainly doesn't make me an expert. I'm giving you my advice and my experience and the experience of my fellow illustrators. Okay, points to be negotiated. 3 points. When you hire an illustrator, this is something you probably don't realize. You are not buying the originals. You are buying the rights to use them in your book and for advertising and promotional materials for that book. The originals are sold separately by the artist. And that's one of the ways you artists don't give up your originals unless there's some extenuating circumstances. You keep those originals because if the book gets really wildly popular, those could be quite lucrative. In my magazine work, every once in a while, someone calls and wants one of the original illustrations. It's nice. It's an extra paycheck. That's why I don't work digitally. I do some. I do some digital work, but I want something tangible in my hands that if someone says, hey, I'll give you X number of $1,000 or whatever for the original, okay, there you go. Number 2, you are not buying the copyrights to the art. You are buying the rights to use them in your book and advertising of it, but the copyrights, by law, have to be sold separately. By law, any original piece of artwork that is done is automatically copyrighted to the artist. So the artist, he can sell the originals all day long, but if you buy an original work of art, you don't own that copyright. You don't have the right to do anything with it other than to hang it on your wall. To do anything else with it, you have to actually buy the copyright or buy into the copyright or get permission from the artist, written permission, because publishers and publishing houses, printing companies, they're not going to print anything without seeing that copyright. They got to know who legally owns this. So it's something that you've got to negotiate separately. Ooh, this is a big one. Number 3, publishers split all royalties equally between the writer and the illustrator. So it's a 50-50 split. If you're doing this yourself, do you wish to share any of the royalties? Then that must be spelled out in the contract. Now, illustrators, understand, if you're working with a self-published author, they don't have the money to do all of this. So you are not going to get royalties. It's probably very unlikely. The likelihood that they're even going to make money off of this is, I'm not trying to rain on anybody's parade. We're talking business, okay? From a business perspective, self-published books very rarely make any money. If they do, it's not a tremendous amount. Well, if you're having to split that 50-50 with somebody and keep up with the accounting and sending out, I get royalties from this book, but University Press of Mississippi is a big operation. They got thousands of books, tens of thousands of books. So they've got an accounting department. Every quarter, I either get something or I don't, but every once in a while I'll get, some money from these coffee table books that sold. So That's fine. They've got an accountant doing that. Well, illustrators understand that they don't have the money to do that. So it's probably unreasonable for you to expect it. Be glad you're getting your money up front. And then you're going to want to look into, at least at the beginning, making sure that a lawyer makes sure that someone trained in copyright law gets it worked out so that the copyright and everything is done correctly, because you just don't want to run into problems with it down the road. And that's why you do this up front. The beauty of doing this up front is that writing and illustrating children's books can be just loads of fun. And I love it. I enjoy doing my own, and I enjoy doing spots for other people and all. But I don't want to get caught into a big legal to-do. And that just will let the air out of your tires real quick. So, going through and doing this is really, really a good idea now, so that you don't get a gotcha at the end. Okay, so the initial consultation. What my PDF says, and this came strictly from one of my Illustrator friends. When I first got into illustration, I'd been a portrait painter for probably 15 years and went to my buddy who was a big illustrator, and I said, well, okay, how are you doing this? And he's the one who gave me a lot of this and some others, but he gave me a lot of what I'm telling you. And he said, he looked me seriously. He said, Bill, do not talk to clients, not without money. I said, okay. He said, let me tell you something. You're going to have people call you who are super excited about their book, and they will talk your ear off. And at the end of the day, you don't know if they're going to buy, you don't know if they're going to do anything. And so you've spent an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours with them gushing over their book. And it may be a great book, but they may decide not to use you, or they may decide, once you've given them all of the kind of stuff I'm telling you, they may back off and go, ooh, I can't afford this right now. And so you've just given 2-3 hours worth of free advice. Well, nobody else does that. So illustrators, unless it's your friend or something, if you get a cold call, I would suggest you write up something like this that I do. You send out, and then if someone's serious, then they send me a check beforehand. Or if we meet in person, they got a check that they hand me, and it's already been decided. We're going to talk for an hour or 2 hours, and that's what I just got paid for. Now, you hand me the check, now let's sit down and talk, and you're welcome to gush all you want to. All right, now, Mr. Wilson's process goes as follows. It is a 4-step process. Step 1 is a flat hourly fee, where Mr. Wilson makes sure the client fully understands the process they're about to embark upon. So, I just gave you, $75 worth of advice for this video for free. This is what you would be getting, if at least some of this, if you were to hire me. Here's your $75 an hour consultation fee. All of this information. This is mostly understanding the legal responsibilities of both parties and making sure the potential client understands some of the process of actually bringing a book to fruition. What will be discussed is the type of illustrations that are desired, whether he is designing the book or not, the copyright transfers, whether royalties are shared, and the ownership of the originals. It does not cover the nuts and bolts of the client's book itself. That's a different process. The rationale is that it's better to pay for a couple hours of consultation than get deep in the woods and realize that this is more than you as the author can deal with and pull out without being too financially committed. After that, if both parties are in agreement, a contract is drawn up, and yes, you want a contract. Everything needs to be spelled out as to what you're doing, what's expected from both parties. Anything that's left up in the air is a potential to blow up in your face. And what can start out as a wonderful, fun process can very quickly devolve into, I thought you meant, I thought you said, what about this? I wasn't expecting that. You didn't ask for this. And everything sours. And before you know it, hard feelings and a lot of stuff. And again, I'm not trying to rain on anybody's parade. I just want to let you know up front that this is the kind of stuff that can happen and you just don't want it to happen. Excuse me, I'm going to check, make sure. Yeah, we're still getting sound, so excellent. So this is all that ugly, not fun publisher stuff that the publishers deal with that, again, you've decided you want to do this, so you got to deal with it. Each of the three-step processes are paid for separately in increments of 1/3. For example, if the agreed upon price for the whole project is $4,500, there would be 3 payments of $1,500 each. If it's $12,000, then there'll be 3 payments of $4,000 each. No actual work will be done, no sketches, no layout, nothing until payment is first rendered. And that's just, again, that's just standard because you as the illustrator, you don't want to go home, and I've done this. I've had this happen, not on a book, but I've had other illustration type work or fine art type work where someone said, oh, I want to do this. Draw me up some sketches. I do it, spend a day, day and a half, and then I can't get them on the phone and find out, they decided they didn't want to do it. Now they don't want to take my calls. Well, okay, don't take my call, but you just gave me a check and I'm cashing your check regardless. So this is just a way for the illustrator. You know the person's serious. If they handed you a check, then they're ready to rock and roll. And so you, as the illustrator, you now are obligated to do your best for them. One thing, let me talk to the illustrators for a second. When you do an illustration or any piece of artwork, you are only partially working for your client. You are also working for everyone that's ever going to see that painting. You'll get clients who'll say, I'll just throw something together, just whatever. I know you're great, just do something real quick. I have illustrator friends, I don't do that. And I have illustrator friends that say, nope, my name's going on this. And their rationale and my rationale is that if I do a painting and it's hanging on the wall and someone walks by and goes, that looks kind of phoned in and thrown together. Well, that's a potential client that may have been very excited about possibly calling me to work, but they're looking and going, that's not really very good. Well, that may have cost me thousands of dollars for a client. So for a potential new client or stream of clients. So no, don't ask me to do something I just throw together. I don't want to. I want to do the best I can because I'm not trying to just impress you. I'm trying to impress all the people that are going to see this book later. And if they're gushing over this book and go, oh, because authors and illustrators understand this. Unless it's, again, a hot seller like J.K. Rowling, nobody buys a children's book because of the text. They buy it because of the illustrations. They go into the bookstore and they see that cover and they go, oh my gosh, that is beautiful. I want that book. So you got to understand, illustrator, this is your portfolio. This is your portfolio. And authors, you got to understand that, people don't go in. The worst thing in the world to happen is your book to go in and be sitting in like this in the bookstore. You want your book to be one of the books that's sitting like this. So, and if it is, then that illustrator is the one who's bringing your book to the public. So, you got to pay him to be able to do that for you because that's the advertising right there. Okay, so we're at the process where you've decided, yes, you're going to hire the illustrator. You have your first. Remember, we got 3 meetings. The first meeting, you get your first payment due, your first 1/3 check. The author gives the illustrator the finished manuscript. Remember we talked earlier, you don't give an illustrator a manuscript and decide and say, well, down the road I'll fix it and change it. No, because that could wind up completely changing everything. So I've got right here in big parentheses, any revisions to the manuscript must fit within the parameters of the illustrations once the process is started, or additional cost may be incurred, usually $75 an hour. So if you go in and decide, oh, I want to change a lot of stuff, okay, that's going to take me in another 4 hours times $75 an hour. That's on top of what you already paid me. So that's another $300. See, again, that's where you have the contract, because if that's spelled out, then there's no misunderstanding. And again, that's what I'm trying to do, is get away from misunderstandings. You don't want that. Okay, again, during this meeting, the author will lay out their overall vision for the look and feel of the book, characters, and backgrounds. You'll discuss how many pages and pagination for the book and the dimensions and format of the book. That's important. Is it going to be a horizontal or a vertical? Is it 8.5 by 11, or is it one of those square cardboard books? So lots to think about. You'll discuss cover designs, fonts, and whether it will be a hard or softbound book, what type of paper it will be printed on. Now, this is another one of my books, a character that I've come up with, Polly, Princess of the Macabre, and this is softbound, printed through Amazon, and they do a pretty good job. I mean, not fantastic, but not bad. The cover, the colors are really nice, rich, and look good. But the interior, look at the difference. Same exact painting. The type of paper you print on makes a huge difference. And if you do your own book, if you do your own YouTube, don't do this. Don't talk to people and tell them this. Keep it still so they can see. The type of paper, if it's a glossy paper that the ink sits on top of, the inks are going to be rich and colorful. But if it's a lighter, less expensive paper that's absorbent, it's going to absorb those inks and it's going to sink in. And the difference between this and my hardbound book and then my book that was published with University Press, all of them are glossy pages and the colors just jump. And if you can afford it, that's absolutely what you want to do. But that stuff, do you want to pay an illustrator to do these lush illustrations with all this vibrant color, and then you're printing it on, super absorbent paper that's going to destroy the look of it anyway? So what's the point? Now, if you are doing it and saying, well, I hope down the road to do hardbound, okay, well, that's fair enough. But if it's just going to be a softbound on relatively inexpensive paper, then you don't want to go hiring someone to do, Mercedes-Benz paintings that are going to be printed on, I don't know, a Ford Taurus paper, okay? The illustrator will be sketching and taking notes at this time, because now we're starting to talk the nuts and bolts of the book. So he's going to be taking notes, what your characters look like, what you're thinking about, how you're kind of thinking things will be laid out. Then he'll take his thumbnail sketches, his notes, and go to his studio. The illustrator will do further rough thumbnail sketches for the individual illustrations, and if he's doing the book design, overall thumbnails of how the overall book will look. He will send you'll either have another meeting, or he will send you low resolution files for your approval. So you're going to look at all of this, and you got to absorb all of this, and give the yay or nay. Now what you get is one free pass. So that means you can look at all of the thumbnails and the overall design of the book and go, well, I don't like this. I wish that were over here. Can we flip this? Can this character be bigger? I mean, all the micromanaging that you're going to want to do. You get a pass for that, and then the illustrator will go back to the studio and will make those changes, just like what you asked for. But then if you decide you want more, then you got to pay extra. And the reason is you could do that forever. So you got to make sure that, and this is what publishers do. A publisher is not going to have an artist send them illustration, send them thumbnails, and then send them back and say, well, redo them and send them some more. And then they send them and say, oh, redo them some more. We've changed pages. No, they're going to pay the illustrator extra, or there'll be some other compensation, but they're not going to just keep, I hate to use the term jerking their chain, but that's kind of what it turns out to be, is jerking the chain. And you as the publisher have to get your thoughts together. And you got to understand, you're working with a professional, so you got to give clear, definitive instructions as to what you want changed, and then be prepared that if you look and go, I know I said I wanted it flipped, but I didn't even want that illustration at all. Well, he put forth the work. Now, illustrators, if you're working with someone who's never done this process before, cut them some slack. I've had people that I've done stuff for, and they'd say, can you do this? And I'd do it, and they go, could you do a little more like this? And, if they were being reasonable, that's fine. I'll do a couple more changes. That's not a big deal. You don't have to be a tyrant about it. You want to make sure, again, that you don't get someone who's vacillating, who can't make a decision. And that's what's normally going to happen, is you're not going to have someone, usually, in my experience, they're not really jerking your chain because they're being a jerk. They're jerking your chain because they're not sure. And their vacillation and unwillingness to commit is because they're scared. They're scared that they're going to make a commitment, it's going to be written in stone, and they're not going to like it. And so you as the illustrator, it's your job to kind of lead them along and help them to feel comforted and at rest, and at peace, that everything's going okay. So it's a organic back and forth, but you want written into your contract that there's a hard deadline, that once we get to this, then I'm not, you can't ask for more without paying for more. Okay. And this sounds so terrible, but listen through this. You are free to stop the process at any time and for any reason. No explanation required. The illustrator may also stop the project for whatever reason he may wish. No explanation required. Should either of these things happen, the illustrator will retain the 1/3 payment and send you high-resolution files of the sketches already rendered that you can do with as you wish. You are then allowed to take those renderings and have another artist complete the project, should you just decide to do so. And it's real simple. It can be nothing more than you've paid the illustrator, he's done all these sketches, he's laid everything out, and it looks great. Something happens, the illustrator gets a divorce, the illustrator dies. I mean, there's lots of things that can happen. And in my career, and in my friends' careers, these things have happened. Well, what do? What if you two just get to an impasse? You just can't get together. And illustrators, you may run into a client that they are absolutely sincere. These are good people. They're nice people. And you've worked with them and you love them to death, and they're getting a divorce. or they've had a tragic family illness and they can't do anymore. What do? Well, these people have paid you. They gave you good money for these thumbnail sketches, and they deserve to have them. So, regardless of who walks away, you need to send them these high resolution sketches that then they are allowed to take. And if they want another illustrator to finish illustrating them, that's fine. Hey, folks, I have no problem. If you want to hire me to do rough thumbnail sketches of your characters and your overall book layout, and you want me to do the designs and stuff, but you want someone else to illustrate it, cool. I'll take that 1/3 payment, and I'll be a happy camper. And I've done things like that. So I take the money. I enjoy, and you as the author, you've paid for it. Use that illustrator's work. If you like it and you think it was well done, absolutely you use it. You paid for it. Now, but if, hope and pray, if everything goes well and the the sketches are approved, then you go to step 2. I would suggest, if it's approved, written confirmation. Just have the illustrators, have the author email you and say, I have approved of all of the sketches and all of the overall layout that you've done. And that way you've got it on record that those things were approved. Now we move on to step 2. Step 2 is roughly the same as step 1. Again, right up front, the illustrator gets the second 1/3 payment. So now 2/3 of the book has been paid for. This is the finished drawing stage. This is where the final pencil renderings are done and low resolution files are emailed to the client. Now these final pencil renderings, depending on the type of art that the artist is doing, they can be quite beautiful and quite highly polished and finished. Again, authors, you have one pass where you can look and decide if any changes need to be made. Now, if there shouldn't be massive changes. If you've approved of their initial rough sketches where, say, you've got 2 characters and they're walking across a wooded area, you have had thumbnails showing that character 1 is here and character 2 is here, and they're walking in front of a wooded area. You do not have the option to say, oh, well, can you swap the characters and turn this into an ocean scene behind them? No, that is the concept stage. That is where all of that's worked out. This stage where, say, you have the 2 characters walking across a wooded area. Let's say you've got an anthropomorphic squirrel. You got a walking, talking squirrel. And at the rough stage, you said, well, he's got a long, bushy tail. The artist does the finished renderings, and you go, could you make the tail a little bushier and a little longer? That's the kind of stuff we're talking about. Or can you make it a little shorter? You put him in a certain type of coat, and I was actually envisioning, instead of single-breasted, a double-breasted coat. Can you do that? It's getting a little more, but okay. Again, now, illustrators, don't get real difficult. If you've got to erase and redo some stuff, be gracious and do it. You may have to shorten the tail, lengthen the tail, shorten it. I did a couple of times until you hit that happy spot. This is where Photoshop could be nice. Photoshop it. I've done that where someone said, I think I want it a little bit longer. Okay, Photoshop, longer. And when they go, oh, I like that. Okay, well then then I would actually draw it, So that's the beauty of Illustrator. But you got that fine line that you're walking. When is this person being overly demanding, and when is this person just legitimately, they're new to the process. They're trying to understand. So, cut them some slack. But then you, as the author, you got to cut people slack too, and you got to realize that the artist is putting in lots of hours on this, and for you to say longer, shorter, at some point the old thing, you got to cut, fish or cut bait. But if you like it, then express your approval, and now the artist goes back to the studio for step 3, and that's the finished renderings. Now, the artist gets full payment for the third and final renderings, and he goes home and does the paintings. Now, let's see. Once the final paintings are approved, then you will get high resolution files of the artwork. Now, again, you do get one pass with this too, so that if there's some things that need to be tweaked, and it should now be a tweaking process, again, don't come in and go, well, I had our bushy-tailed squirrel in a red coat. I just thought the red coat would be great. But now looking at your illustrations, can you go back over 30 pages where he appears 60 times and repaint every one of them blue with pink polka dots? Yeah, for $75 an hour, I can paint any color you want. I mean, that may sound harsh, but you're asking for a lot. On the flip side, illustrators, if someone comes in and you painted a character, and that one character, maybe they've reimagined the color a little bit or something, like you painted it red. Could you paint that one character's coat blue? I don't know. I paint in everything: oil, watercolor, casein. I painted it all. To a large extent, all that stuff can be redone. So, you as an illustrator have to look and go, is this something that's really unreasonable? And if it's not, cut them some slack, do it. So, yeah, this is where it all ends and winds up. So to recap, and then, like I said, you've already got your payment, and you give them whatever it is you're supposed to give them as the illustrator. You either give them the originals if you've agreed to do that, but you definitely give them high resolution files. I suggest both of you, illustrators, authors, what you want are JPEGs and RAW files. You really want RAW files, because RAW files can be, there's a whole lot more data on a RAW file than there is on a JPEG. And so that RAW file is going to have a lot of data that someone can come in, the printer can come in and tweak and do a lot of things with that's not possible to do with a JPEG. So make sure that it's a high resolution RAW file and a JPEG included. That way you can just do things with a JPEG without having to go in and fuss around with the RAW file. Illustrators, please don't send your client only RAW files. That's just really not nice. Send them RAW plus JPEG so that they can, crop them and color correct a little bit, and then put them on Facebook or send them out to whoever. They can put them on social media without having to go in and dig around, because chances are they are not going to be experts with Photoshop. They may not even have Photoshop. So they're really not going to have a means where they can work with a RAW file. Authors, make sure, again, in your contract, you can say, I want RAW plus JPEG files. RAW so that the printers, I can give them to the printers. JPEG so that I can do something with them. Because you don't want to be given files that you got to go schlepping around your buddies. Do you have Photoshop? Can you print these for me? No. Let's work together real nice and understand what each party needs. So, to restate the whole process, there's the initial consultation, $75 an hour, due at the time of the meeting, and that's where we talk about the overarching process. Then we have the three-step process. Rough layouts, 1/3 of negotiated price due before work begins. Once it's approved, second, final drawings rendered, second payment due at the beginning. And then once that's approved, then number 3, final paintings rendered, third and final payment due before work begins. Lastly, final digital files transferred to the client. So, yeah, that's a whirlwind of information. And I'm glad. I'm probably going to post this PDF on my website so that people can just go to it. Normally I've just been sending it to potential clients. But yeah, I'm glad for you to have it, because I'd rather you go through this without me than try to get me and talk through all this. But this is how it works. This is the world of professional illustration. Your mileage may vary depending on who you're working with, but if you're working with a professional, someone who's done this a long time, like I said, this is not my my format. I didn't come up with this out of whole cloth. This outline was given to me years ago by Illustrator friends. That's how they have worked for decades, and I just took it and put it together for myself. So, if you're working with a professional, that's what you're going to be dealing with, and just read and research and understand all the processes that you're going through. If you are interested in my work, you can look on my website and contact me. I work in just about every media there is. I work in multiple styles. What's called an old school illustrator, and that's just how I was trained, and that's how I've worked for, now we're pushing 40 years. If you've enjoyed this episode of The Arthropologist, please hit the like button. And if you'd like to see more episodes like this, think about subscribing.